Thanks for your patience with this one, guys, and apologies for the audio quality. Recording from a different environment tonight, but anyway, so Spry play for Friday. We've got number 8 here. We're going to talk about labels. In this example, I'm going to be using source labels, but you can also use labels in destination paths. So what I have on screen at the moment is a reasonably common kind of layout that people might have for their path, which is where they've got a comment above a series of things that they've done, so that if they want to revisit their path and they can understand the context of what they've put in. So a source label is kind of like taking that work that you've already done, but then allowing you to access that through your results. So basically, if you've got comments around your code like this, what you can do is you can add the syntax for a label, which is label with a colon after it, an optional space. The only other trick to this, if you don't want your label to continue to apply underneath, you need to, just like allow advance or in range or something else, you need to turn your label back off underneath. So we've got a label here which is called alpha S1 box cut. So if I rerun my schedule, where this appears is you can access it in pivot tables, but I'm just going to focus on using the output schedule to make it easier. I'll just go to an output schedule and column choose my way down to a source label. So I'll have destination label as an option as well if you're destination scheduling. So you can see now that I've got this label that's been added to all of these paths, all these steps in the output schedule. So where these are, I guess the first place, or the place where they're often the most useful, is going to be in Gantt charts. So if I fire open a Gantt chart and I have a default Gantt chart that's been created already, you can see I've got this current, everything's named as the default, which is the first 2 levels of your output schedule. So I can change this. So instead of using this name of the pit and the strip, what I can ask for is the label. And generally the easiest way to deal with that is to check to see if there is a label. So search for the label. So if the label is not equal to nothing, as in if it's not empty, use it. Otherwise, use this. Now I'm going to make a quick change to the way this works, but this is an example of how you can say, look, yeah, use that if you've got one. And now you can see I've got this alpha S1 box cut. Now, you might have a quite long comment that you're using. So the first thing we're going to have a look at with some more advanced label stuff is how we can delimit them. And what that term means, if you're not familiar, is how do we split a label into multiple parts. So I'm going to add a little bit of extra information here. Like, let's say it's a high rate. So I'm going to rerun my schedule, and that extra information will come through to the Gantt chart, but I don't want to show that extra information on the Gantt chart. I want to make sure that it only shows this component of the label. So one of the things that I can do in my custom fields is I can create specific labels for different purposes. So I might call this one short label. And what I do is I take, actually one thing I'm going to suggest that we do before we jump into that. In here, what I've done is I've created a label and then an alternative label. If it doesn't exist, I'd prefer to keep that out in a custom field. So I'd generally have something called like Gantt label, and you would put something similar to it in here, which is if the label doesn't exist, do the label. So you kind of pull that out of here. And what that means is when you actually reference it in here, you kind of keep all of your formulas or your complicated formulas in a single place. So in here you can just put Gantt label will be what it's called. If you're not exactly sure, you go searching for it in your custom fields. So makes for a little bit of a simpler thing to read, which is if it's productive, give me the Gantt label. And all the Gantt label is at the moment is the default source label that's been written in, also the source label you've written, or it's a pit and strip combo, which is what it is at the moment. You might want to change this, make it per process or per equipment. We'll leave it like this for the moment. And then with the short label, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Gantt label and I'm going to split it. So one of the functions we have in here is the split function. Takes three things: takes the text, the index, and the delimiter. Similar to other things relating to index in Spry, index 0 means the first, and when a split happens, so we're going to split this Gantt label. So the first thing we're going to feed into the split function is the Gantt label, and then we're going to say index 0, and I'll explain that in a moment, and then we're going to split it based on the minus symbol. So we'll rerun that. Currently, you can see the full information. If I change from using the Gantt label to using the short label, I've now got the alpha X, just the alpha S1 box cut. So what's happening here is, I'll go back to my equipment path, is I've got my alpha S1 box cut, and then I've split it based on this character, and then I've said return me the 0 index, and what that means is essentially it's the left hand side of the split, of the first split. So if you have multiple minus symbols, then you might have indices other than 0, 1, 0 and 1, but generally you're going to want to return just the thing on the left or the thing on the right. So the thing on the left is going to be the 0, and the thing on the right is going to be index 1. So if I wanted to return, in this example, if I wanted to return extra label, then I just change the Gantt label and I return the 1 of that. So if I rebuild those, go to my output schedule and pull in those two new labels, we've got, well, actually got three. We've got the Gantt label, which is the full information. We've got the extra label, which is the stuff that's on the right, and we've got the short label, which is what's on the left. So we have some other options for what we do with this. So right now I've created this terminology for, and I've just said, extra information is that it's a higher rate. What I might want to do is, and this is where you can get as advanced as you like, it's up to you, but you might want to have a variety of different bits of optional information that you add, that you split out multiple ways. So the easiest way to do this is to come up with something that starts a split and that ends a split. And what I mean by that is you might want to have something that affects the rate, or something that discusses the rate. So you might want to put in something like R and then a colon, and you might type R high. And so you need something that sort of tells it that R, which is I'm using for rate, you might go R high. You might put, what other information might be useful here? Might go Z for zone, and then you might put in the least that you're in. So I'm just going to make up a particular zone, and then I'm going to put a full stop at the end. You can pick any character you like, but you're looking for something unique that starts it, and doesn't have to be unique, but just something that ends it. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to create a couple more filters. And so I'm going to take the Gantt label, which is the full label, and then I'm going to give you the, we'll just go with R component of that. And it's a tiny bit trickier. It's one more expansion on how this works, which is we're going to split the label, but this time what we're going to do is we're going to split it firstly on the R. So we'll take the Gantt label and we'll split it on, what we want to return here is the right hand side of the R. So I want everything on the right hand side of the R. So I'm going to split it based on two characters this time. So it's the R and the colon. And then I'm going to wrap that entire split. So right now what that's given me is that. So I'm going to wrap that entire split, but this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to split on a full stop. So I'm going to wrap that whole thing, undo, try that again. I'm going to wrap that whole thing in a second split. And this is advanced. If it doesn't make sense, it's okay. This is more just to show you some other options. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to return the left-hand side of a split based on the full stop. And so what that's going to give me is the word high. And then if I do the same for the Z, that's going to give me the Z component. So I'll rebuild that. I'll show you what that looks like in the output schedule. So we've got an R and a Z. Oh. What have I done here? Good example for a live one. So I've made my own mistakes. Do I get the right split on the R? No. Have I actually run the schedule yet? That might help. That was the issue. I was just rebuilding my custom fields, but I hadn't actually run the schedule. So one of the things that happens is that this only gets written on a run of the schedule. And what I was doing there, the mistake I was making because I didn't do a trial run, was I was just rebuilding results without actually rerunning the schedule. So let's try rerunning that. The schedule is quick to run anyway. So I was curious as to why that wasn't working, and it was just user error. So anyway, so you can see now we've got this R column, which has the high in it, and the Z column, which has the fake lease in it. So if I just grab this and put underneath it, we'll just put normal at that point, and then we rerun the schedule, is that you'll see that at some point down here, wherever it got split, I'm not sure exactly when that would happen, you can see that it's changed the text there. So labels apply on that piece of equipment and on any task until you otherwise change the label. So I'm going to show you one final little look on things and how this might be useful. So I'm going to go back to my Gantt chart, and I'm going to make some slight adjustments here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add that Z into my level structure. So any custom field that's a text type can actually form part of your Gantt level structure. So if I add that, you can see now that I'm inside this particular lease, and I've now got my equipment within that lease. And I can also color based on certain things. So right now I can actually choose to, instead of coloring by equipment, which is what it's doing at the moment, so let's make sure that's clear. Our equipment doesn't have any color in this default, so the 6040 will give it a color, which is, that'll do. Excuse me, got a little bit of a cough. And what we'll do instead dangers of doing things live, so my cough's getting worse. Custom fields, we'll rerun the schedule. Excuse me. So we'll rebuild so that it includes all of the current custom fields, and then we can actually color it based on whether or not it's high rate, low rate, medium rate, etc. So we'll just go with couple of colors here. This is not to show you necessarily what a good idea to do is, but it's just to give you a look. So currently we're colored by equipment, and we might set a background color as well, which is sort of a light red, and a header color, which is also the same or similar red. So that'll do. So you can see now, background color, nice red color here. Box cut is currently red because that's the color of the equipment. We can now color based on the rate. If we zoom out a little bit, you can see that when our rate changes, our color changes. So you can kind of build this up, with a lot of flexibility. It's up to you how you want to deal with the various splits that you're going to do if you want to use them in your source labels. But the purpose of this was just to give you some ideas as to some ways that you might be able to extend, even if you're just using labels as a basic, but then some opportunity for you to do a little bit more with them. So I hope that was interesting. If you have any questions about how they work, any things that you're trying to do that don't work, give us a buzz, 35390000, or as always email support@precisionmining.com, and have a great weekend.